Hello, Tara here. Last chapter of the Bridge to Belle Island. Isabel is back on her island. Benjamin is in London still, as far as we know. So let's find out what happens in this last bit. Chapter 28. On a spring day, the words again echoed through Benjamin's mind. Go to Belle Island, and quickly. But this time, the voice urging him was his own. His mission was far different. The desire to travel there more sincere, the anticipation sweeter. Once more, Benjamin Booker found himself bounced, jostled, and thoroughly shaken on the coach journey into Berkshire. Thankfully, he was now armed with ginger lozenges for his stomach, and a tonic of cowslip, blessed thistle, and feverfew his father had decocted for his vertigo. He'd also given Benjamin a strong dose of encouragement for what he was about to do. As the miles passed, Benjamin popped another ginger lozenge into his mouth and recalled with fondness the Christmas Isabel had spent with his family. Even proud Reuben had seemed to approve of her, and his parents certainly did. In her turn, Isabel had joined in the family conversations and good-natured teasing with warmth and ease. It was the happiest Christmas of his memory. Arriving at Maidenhead's Bear Inn, Benjamin hired a driver, the same young man with his rickety gig who had delivered him to Belle Island on his first visit almost a year ago. If Ben wasn't so eager to see Isabel again, he probably would have walked the few miles instead. Finally, they reached the outskirts of Riverton. The hamlet curved around the riverbank like a gently angled arm, beckoning him closer. What an inviting picture it made on this sunny spring day, with its jumble of shops and cottages brightened by flower pots and blooming gardens. The river, he saw, had returned to its banks and flowed peacefully past, as though in apology for its former violence. The ducks and swans had returned, the fishermen and net-makers. And so had he. Benjamin surveyed the new arched bridge spanning the sparkling water and thought it a marked improvement over the old one. "Set me down here if you would," Benjamin told the driver, foot tapping against the floorboards. Now that he was close, his heart beat uncomfortably hard. He paid the driver and turned to look at the island. No fog shrouded it this time. He savored the sight of the green lawn and budding trees, and the tall stone manor house swathed in flowering vines. Movement caught his eye. Across the bridge, a figure appeared. A familiar female figure in a long red coat, a deep bonnet framing her lovely face. Seeing him, Isabel waved, a welcoming smile splitting her mouth. Walking over the bridge, Benjamin took stock of its solid strength. On the other side, Isabel hesitated when she reached the bridge, but then stepped up and started across. When he'd first come to Belle Island, out of his element and already longing for the comforts of London, some inner sense or God's spirit had told him his life would never be the same again. It turned out to be true. He thanked God for all that had transpired since he'd become acquainted with this place and with this woman. They met in the middle of the arched structure. "The new bridge turned out well," he said. "Thank you. I think so too." She hesitated. "I hope some new legal tangle has not arisen. You did not explain when you wrote." He swallowed. "No, Miss Wilder, Isabel, I have come to ask you a question." "Oh?" She blinked, a dozen emotions crossing her countenance. "How would you feel about marrying a country lawyer?" Her mouth twitched with humor. "That depends. Do I know him?" "Not as well as I would like." Eager to bridge the space between them, he stepped near and took her hands in his. She stared up at him, wonder and hope and questions written on her face. "What about the partnership with Mr. Hunt?" "I thanked him, but turned it down. An attorney in Maidenhead has also expressed interest. Or I may practice on my own, in Riverton." "But you love London." He shook his head, his gaze traveling over her brow, her cheeks, her lips. "I like London. I love you." For a few heartbeats, she simply stared at him. Then she rose on tiptoes and kissed him warmly on the lips. She pulled back, smiling up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Then my answer is yes." Sweet pleasure filled him, and he felt his heart crack open like the clicking of a lock. He cupped the sides of her face and leaned near, pressing his lips to hers softly, then angling his head to deepen the kiss. Finally, he straightened and pulled her close, savoring her nearness and her answer and her touch. A warm flush spread over him, as though he'd sipped orange wine. He felt lightheaded, even a little dizzy. But this time, vertigo had nothing to do with it. 2 months later, the banns had been read, the ring purchased, and the wedding breakfast planned. Rose and Mr. Adair arrived early to help with preparations. The nuptials would not take place in London, nor in the chapel in the Wilder house. They had amicably agreed to marry in St. Raymond's in Riverton. The Bookers were happy to travel to Berkshire, and the small family chapel was not large enough for the many local friends and neighbors who wished to celebrate with them. They would, however, host the wedding breakfast on Belle Island. The happily anticipated day finally arrived, a fine, sunny summer morning. Rose, as Isabel's attendant, had chosen an elegant dress of ivory satin for the occasion, and Miss O'Toole wove flowers into her hair. Isabel wore a new gown of palest blue silk and a veiled cap. O'Toole offered to curl and arrange her hair as well for the special day, and Isabel gratefully accepted. She missed Lottie, but was glad she and Evan were happily married. Someone knocked on the bedchamber door and poked her head into the room. "Our old friends welcome?" Seeing Carlotta's mischievous smile, Isabel gasped in delight. "Definitely!" She rose and embraced her. "What a happy surprise! I could not miss my chance to see you as a bride at last. I hope to arrive earlier to help you dress, but ooh la la, your hair is perfection already! Miss O'Toole, you are a genius!" The elderly matron grinned and blushed like a schoolgirl. "May I help you with your veil, and perhaps a bit of rouge?" Carlotta asked. "For old time's sake?" Isabel pressed her hand. "Of course." Carlotta deftly applied a touch of rouge to Isabel's lips and cheeks, then helped pin the veil to the cap and arranged it on her head just so. She stepped back and surveyed her handiwork. "Novia bonita," she concluded. "Now the bride is ready for her wedding day. And night," she winked. And Isabel found herself grinning and blushing more than O'Toole. Promising to see her after the ceremony, Carlotta slipped out to rejoin Evan and walk with him to the church. When they were both dressed and ready, Rose took Isabel's hands and beamed at her in affection and pleasure. "Lottie is right. How beautiful you are, Aunt Belle." "As are you." Isabel touched her face. "I have never seen you look lovelier. You are absolutely glowing." "Thank you. That is as it should be." Rose's eyes sparkled. "For I am expecting a child. It's early days yet, but is that not good news?" Isabel's heart squeezed, and she drew in a long breath. "Very good news." She embraced her beloved niece and whispered, "Your mother and father would be so proud of you." When she released her, tears brightened Rose's eyes. "I miss them, but I am ever so thankful to have you." Isabel kissed her cheek. "My sentiments exactly." Together, she and Rose walked from the house toward the bridge, arm in arm. Reaching it, Isabel hesitated, as she always did. But today, her pulse pounded not from fear, but from excitement as she anticipated the ceremony, the marriage, and the life to come. Rose studied her profile and asked tentatively, "All right?" "Yes. Better than all right." Isabel smiled, and the two walked on, the new bridge reassuringly solid beneath their feet. She recalled again the cherished memory of happily crossing the old bridge with her loved ones to attend Grace's wedding at the village church, surrounded by friends and neighbors, and afterward welcoming everyone back to Belle Island for a joy-filled wedding breakfast. For so long, Isabel had hoped to relive that memory, and now she would. The bride in her dream had changed, but the reality was even better than she'd imagined. When they arrived at the church, there was Benjamin, handsome in a dark suit of clothes and snowy white cravat. He stared in wonder as she joined him at the altar, love and admiration shining in his deep brown eyes. Isabel had never felt prettier or more cherished. The service was warmly officiated by Mr. Trulock, who had known Isabel all her life. His daughter Arminda played the new organ, filling the church with music, along with friends and loved ones. After the ceremony, Isabel and Benjamin walked back over the new bridge together, hand in hand. There, on the veranda, near the place they had first met, the newlywed couple shared a lingering kiss while they awaited the others. The guests, led by village girls holding a large arch of flowers and ribbons, began the procession over the bridge, eager for the festive banquet being held on the veranda of the Wilder house. There, a generous buffet meal awaited, prepared by Mrs. Philpotts and the kitchen maids, including a large bride cake decorated with sugar icing and flowers. Then came the servants and tenants who'd attended the wedding, Mr. Linton and the Weavers, the Farringdons, and many other friends and neighbors. And finally came 3 couples arm in arm, Rose and Mr. Adair, Evan and Lottie, and Mr. and Mrs. Booker, followed by Reuben Booker, Mr. Hunt, and the Trulocks bringing up the rear. Isabel was delighted to see Mr. Christie offer Arminda his arm. The vicar's daughter lay her gloved hand on his with a dimpled smile. What pleasure to see so many dear, happy faces walk over to Belle Island to join the celebration. Yes, Isabel wished her parents, brother, and sister might have lived to see this day, but she refused to let their absence spoil her joy. God had given her a new family in the Bookers, as well as her staff and tenants. Although they were surrounded by dozens of people, Benjamin could not keep his eyes from one person in particular, his bride, his Isabel. She had never looked more beautiful, and he had never been happier or more thankful. They sat side by side among those feasting together at long tables set up on the veranda, but Benjamin had little appetite for food. He felt full already, his heart, his stomach, his life. He ate a few bites of this and that without really tasting anything, stopping often to acknowledge a well-wisher or accept congratulations, or to squeeze Isabel's hand. After they had eaten, he and Isabel rose and crossed the veranda together to speak to his parents. Benjamin leaned down and kissed his mother's plump cheek. "We are so pleased you are here with us. Thank you for coming." She beamed at her ready, crooked smile, our eyes warm. "We would not have missed it for the world." His father rose and awkwardly patted Benjamin's shoulder, the most affection he recalled receiving from him in years, and for a moment he could not speak over the emotion clogging his throat. "Congratulations, son," his father said. Then he turned to Isabel and pressed her hand. "Welcome to the family, my dear." Isabel smiled from one to the other. "Thank you. I could not be happier about that." His father looked around at the grand house and idyllic island setting. "So, this is your new home. I can see why you like it here." He returned his gaze to Benjamin and said, "A country lawyer, eh?" He nodded his approval. "It suits you." "Thank you, sir." Isabel said, "You know, there is a medical office for let in the village. If you ever decide to leave London, you would be more than welcome to move your practice here." Mrs. Booker and her husband exchanged looks of surprise and interest. She said, "That is very kind of you, my dear." "We shall give it some thought," he added. Then Mrs. Booker asked, "Will you be taking a wedding trip?" "Yes." Benjamin pressed Isabel's fingers and looked into her eyes. "A short one." They were planning to travel to the south coast to spend a few romantic days in Weymouth. They would start small, until Isabel's comfort with travel increased. The island remained the place she most wanted to be, and he guessed Isabel would always be a homebody. Anxiety still visited her from time to time, but she no longer let it trap her. He was proud of her for taking small steps, first London and soon Weymouth. But deep down he knew that after any journey, her favorite sight to see would always be the bridge to Belle Island. And now it was his as well. The end. Well, everybody just comment what you think of the story, and it was a fun one. Thanks for joining me.